Automatically broadcast straight to YouTube, right?
That's right. We are live right now. I'm so excited to welcome Christine Von Raesfeld to the Adnexi Live for this week. And Christine is a patient advocate. She is a connector, and she is the founder of People with Empathy. And I'm so glad to have you on. We are broadcasting live to 3 different locations, to my LinkedIn page, to the Adnexi Facebook page, and to the Adnexi YouTube channel. So excited to have you here. We're here to talk about breaking silos in patient advocacy and patient and biopharma relations. And why don't we start, Christine? Tell me a little bit about your journey into patient advocacy.
Okay. Well, first, thank you for having me. And thank you to Christina for introducing us. We just found out we live near each other, so this will be an interesting connection. But I started a long time ago in patient advocacy. I started out as just a patient myself. Started out as a child. I was 5 years old when I started experiencing symptoms, and then my life from there just kind of took every turn possible in healthcare. I like to think of my life as a series of unfortunate events when it comes to healthcare, and just that everything that could go wrong did. So I look at these as opportunities and not as something that has hurt me or put me like into a corner where someone should feel sorry for me. I look at it as more as a chance to share my opinion and my voice, and to make sure that nobody after me has to go through these things. So starting out,
Christine, I love that. I love that. Just want to pause there for 1 second just to acknowledge that, the fact that, life threw a bunch of difficulties your way, and you're using them, right, to help other people, to raise your voice, and not to see yourself as a victim, but to see yourself as somebody who can, break through and help other people. Love that.
Yeah, and I think that's important, right? I think especially in this industry, we look at patients, and I've conducted a few workshops and spoken at conferences, and I've asked people in industry what their perspective of a patient is. And I often get people that come up to me and say, "You are not a typical patient." And in my head, and to them a lot of times, I say, "What is your idea of a typical patient?" Because my friends who are amazing patient advocates and patients themselves also work in industry. They run their nonprofits. They do amazing things, but they're not really considered as much because they do have that term patient attached to them. And I think it's an interesting space to be in, because patients are the center of healthcare, right? Everything revolves around patients. And we have industry. I've spoken to people in industry at times where they've said, "I don't need patients." And I thought, you must be in the wrong space, because healthcare is all about patients. And I always tell people, maybe you don't need them now, but you will need them at some point. And maybe not having them involved right now is actually hurting you in the process.
Yeah, so let's go deeper into that. So what is the benefit of having the patient voice in drug development?
So I think the advantage is first just knowing exactly the situation that people are going through. I think that as industry, we look at it as we're helping people. And I had someone in pharma tell me, we had a conversation about clinical trials, and it was an interesting conversation. I said, I think patients should own their own data. I think that maybe it's unethical to pay patients to participate in clinical trials, but then maybe it's unethical for you to take money for a clinical trial as well, if we're looking at it in that sense. But it was funny because his image and his idea of clinical trials was, why would I pay you when I'm trying to help you, right? So it was this whole vision of, he was doing it to help me, but didn't want to involve me at all, right? Felt like he had the answers. He knew everything that happened in this condition and in this space, and he knew how I thought, right? Mm-hmm. And so he was willing to go into this process and develop things and processes without even considering a patient perspective, because he knew best. And so what I think that what we forget is that we don't always know best. We may know our job, we may know what we're hired to do and what we were trained to do, and what in industry is your calling or whatever, but you don't know the situation of the people that are living in it. And I think,
absolutely.
Right? And we have this whole, I keep telling pharma, you have a whole untapped workforce out there Like these amazing people like me, who some of them can't take a job because of medical, and they, our disability system doesn't really allow for that flexibility for a patient, right? But it doesn't mean that they're discounted or less than because they're in a certain situation. And I think incorporating those perspectives and those ideas and seeing how people live is going to get you further along in the process than you ever could be. Right.
Absolutely.
And
I
I think it is.
completely agree. I mean, I completely agree. I've been on the side of, working for a biopharmaceutical company and trying to bring a new drug to market, a new treatment to market. And I think one of the first realizations that I had on that job was, look, I was working on PKU back then, phenylketonuria. And one of the first realizations I had is like, I don't have PKU. I don't have a child with PKU. So the first thing I need to do is I need to talk to someone who has PKU, someone who has a child with PKU that they're caring for. That's the voice that really matters, right? It's not my voice. It's not what I would want this to look like because I'm not in their shoes. So I think that's a super important point, Christine. So how do we do this? How do we start breaking through these silos and engender better patient biopharma relationships?
So for me personally, what I think is it's all about connection, right? It's about finding the right people that have the same vision, the same goal, and the same purpose. I think it's about involving yourself in the community, right? Actually being in these communities instead of stepping in and stepping out when something doesn't work. Maybe getting involved. I think there's so many ways to think out of the box when we work with patients that people don't consider, right? And there's a lot of valuable insight from patients that aren't heard about until way later in the process, right? And now, as an industry, we have to go back and fix these problems that we thought we knew, right? We thought we talked to certain people, and these people in this industry, they may not be patients, but they're experts in this industry. So they told us that this is what happens. But then we didn't involve the patients, we involved these experts, and now we get into the patient community and take an app, right? For example, here's an app, and we decided we're going to put it in yellow, and these certain people can't read white on yellow. And now you have to go right back through and redesign your whole app and your whole process, and now involve these people where you had done this in the beginning and formed a relationship where they trust you and they know that you really are working for them. They're going to help you. Right. And to make this profitable for everyone, I think that what we forget about is that we think we're helping people. And we think that, we're, in industry, we're going to find a cure, we're treating them, we're doing this, we're doing all these amazing things for people, but they're not the things that they need. Right. I get a lot of doctors too who tell me with certain conditions, oh, well, this drug has this side effect and we won't give it to you because of these side effects. And I'm thinking those side effects mean nothing to me. Right. I am totally fine dealing with these side effects as long as my quality of life is this certain way, right? But I think we forget that patients are people. We start to disassociate them, and we start to look at them as de-identified data or as, as our study. And so I think reconnecting and finding that there is a person behind this, and how do we connect with that person and make them feel like they have a purpose and that they are here for a reason. And I think a lot of these people that we deal with, that I say these people like I'm not one of them, right? I think a lot of patients like me, where you're on Social Security, you felt like you have no options. You're looked at by industry as a person who really doesn't know much. Right? I go in and I've asked people who run clinical trials, what is your idea of a patient? And I've had people come up to me, and depending on where they are in industry, their idea of a patient is different, right? Mm-hmm. Whatever clinical trial they're running, their idea of a patient is different. And the position they hold in a company even makes it different, right? So it's knowing that there is a patient, but they're also a person, they have a valuable perspective, and they have a perspective that most people don't think about. Right?
Yes, absolutely. I think what we're getting to is that you don't have to have this title of patient advocate to have something to contribute to this process of developing a new treatment or helping that biopharma company that is working on developing that treatment, right? Any of these of these patients have value, right? And the value is the fact that they are a person living with this condition, and they're the ones that are the expert, right, at telling you what that is like, what that feels like, what that involves on a daily basis. I love that, Christine. Thank you. There are a couple of comments here on the right side that I want to address, so I'll read them off to you, Christine. So we have Christina Wolf, of course, our magnificent connector, talking about us, giving us all sorts of beautiful compliments. Thank you, Christina. And then we have Michael Young, who says, activated patient advocates are not typical patients, but are so needed. Thanks, Sandra and Christine, for discussing these patient-centric issues. So let's talk about that. Are these activated patient advocates different than your typical patient? Like, let's talk about that, because I think there's like a nice, interesting core to that specific sentence.
And actually, I don't know. I've been talking with other people in industry and other patient advocates who work in industry, where I kind of feel like the term patient advocate hurts us to a certain extent, right? And I feel like walking into a meeting with a CEO, patient advocate casts this light on me of somebody that needs help, of somebody that, you know, really doesn't know what's going on, right? Because you're just a patient advocate. You have lived experience, but you don't have an education. And I think that reframing, first of all, what we have to do is reframe our idea of patients, right? That there aren't, a typical patient is, I don't know what a typical patient is, right? I think if you give any patient a purpose or empower them to do something to change their lives, they will take that opportunity. But I also feel like we live in an industry where it's pretty much a boys' club, right? And it's this very siloed, you know, unless you know the right people, how do you get into this? And if you are a patient, a typical patient who doesn't have this experience, how do you even get into this space, right? And for me, it was a lot of pushing my own way in, right? Not finding the right answers from people that I had in my life to where I felt like I had to do this. I went out to conference organizers and said, I have an interest in this conference. I'm a patient. How can I get there? How can I bring this information to other patients? But I think in that respect, we also, the idea of a patient, it kind of silos them themselves, right? You feel like, I'm a patient, I don't have a voice unless I'm, you know, this or unless I'm that. And I think that term patient advocate just really bothers me to a certain extent. I think it's a great term. I think, yes, a patient advocate, but I also feel like I spend 30 minutes explaining to people, depending on where they are in industry, what a patient advocate is. Right? I was at JP Morgan. A patient advocate is someone that pushes paperwork, right? To provider system, a patient advocate is someone that is walking them through the process of filling out the paperwork and registering them, right? To a patient, it's someone that's there to save their lives. So just that idea of what a patient advocate is and this typical patient really needs to be changed. So for me, it's again about looking at people as people and what they have to offer and what they want with their lives and what they can do and empowering them in that way. And I think from there, you can build these relationships, right? And you can build that trust and build this community. And I think it is key finding these patient advocates who have their own voices, who aren't really attached to one thing, but also patients that have the ability to say no, right? That can say that this is not in the best interest of my community. And while it may help me personally, it's not something I want to push out for my community, you know? And so I think we're looking at morals and a lot of different other things that go into play, but just this idea of patience, I think really needs to change, right? I don't want to be an atypical patient. I want to be a respected person in this industry. And how do we change that? And is there a title or something that gives something more meaning than just a patient advocate? Because I do think that stigma and that name kind of just does present a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Christine. We have another comment from Dina Forbes. She says, an integral part of being a patient advocate is helping people be their own health advocates. Patients are people and are experts. They should be treated as such. Thanks for sharing your valuable insight. So yes, we love this. Fingers for that, right? I mean, I think that's exactly it, right? Like patients are people and they're experts, right? Just by being a patient, you are an expert. Any other comments you want to add to what Dina just shared with us?
Well, just sharing your own story. I mean, just fighting for yourself, I think, is huge. And I think patient advocacy is looked at in so many different ways, right? Patient advocacy for yourself, for industry, for pharma. Like there's so many different avenues of advocacy. But I think the first and the most important is advocating for yourself, right? So the reason I got to any of this was because I wasn't finding answers from people. I was writing letters to doctors. I was submitting requests to see other people. And I was being told by people that you look great. Your labs look amazing. You're healthy in my eyes, and go see a psychiatrist. And so I think it's that initial, I was being suppressed and everybody telling me, you are fine, you look great, you fit this category and you look amazing, right? And it kind of got me to a point where I thought, well, maybe I'm just crazy, right? But then knowing myself and knowing my space and what I've lived with, I knew none of this stuff was normal. So it was a whole battle, right, of fighting for myself and making people even realize that what I felt was real. And I get a lot of doctors and people who I'm going through a weird, diagnosis of weird, odd conditions now. And I'm like, I'm exhausted. I'm sleeping a lot. And everyone's telling me, well, it's probably your body trying to catch up. And I'm like, you don't know my body. I know when I'm catching up. And I think that's the thing, is that people often let other people's perspective and opinions influence the way they think. And I think that we need to really explore, like, yourself, what you feel, what you're going through. And it's these experiences that will help anyone in industry. But again, we have to see that. We can't dismiss what people are going through, and we really have to listen, because there are perspectives and valuable perspectives that you have through lived experience that are better than any education you can get in a school.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that, Christine. So let's end with this. I would love for you to paint a vision of what the ideal patient-biopharma relationship would look like.
Okay, so my perfect picture is one that first involves empathy, right? That people are able to look at the patients and look at the people in this industry as their equals, as somebody that maybe not within it, just set that boundary for a relationship, that you are our equal and you are our partner, right? That you are not a token patient that's just included because we have to have you there. But what I found with a lot of the companies that I work with is that personal interest in just me as a person as well, right? I have a lot of these CEOs that are amazing people that have become friends, that now, they'll see I'm in the hospital and they check in on me. And I think it's just that, right? We look at everyone else in our industry as our friends, but we look at patients as patients. So why are we not looking at them as our equal? So I think establishing that relationship of trust, of hearing them, of listening to them, and knowing that they have a valuable perspective. And actually, and on the patient side of it, knowing that there are certain patients that deserve to be in this space, that need to be in this space, and then kind of filtering out those who may not, have those same objectives. I don't know. It's a very scary, slippery slope on where we're all going. And I don't know where it is, but I think empathy is the key, and starting those with relationships that really matter. Relationships where you are truly invested in this person and their potential, and empowering them and their community, and then working with them. And so, I don't know. I think starting it on these small levels, I know that we're not going to change things overnight in industry, but by starting on a smaller level with these smaller organizations and smaller biotech companies, that's going to show everybody that you establish these relationships, you give this voice and you give this platform, and amazing things can happen for all of us.
I love it, Christine. Thank you so much for that response. And I completely agree. That's what we need. We need empathy. We need trust, right? We need care. So that is wonderful. Christine, I really admire your passion for this topic. And I really thank you for coming on today for this live. I think it will get a lot of people excited about working on making progress in this really important area of patient and biopharma relations. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. And I hope that anyone listening, think about it. Think about the patients that you know in this space and what makes them effective. And if you have any ideas on a title that we can get away from patient advocate and just have that lived experience as part of a title to know that someone's been through that and they're educated and they belong there. I don't know, looking for suggestions.
Awesome. Thank you, Christine. Have a great day.
Thank you, you too. Good talking to you. And thank you for all your comments, everyone.
Yes, thanks for all your comments. Really appreciate them. Thank you.
It was fun. Cool.